Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. This is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. My main focus, as you well know, is astrology. I've been doing this for a long time, trying to push astrology into your ears so that you understand it, because it is the most fascinating divination tool in the world, and people all the time, perfect strangers, when I do readings for them, are blown away by the accuracy of the astrology that we can bring to them. And this is just one of the great mysteries of the cosmos. But it's a fascinating mystery and well worth understanding. Part of my goal is to help educate you guys out there on astrology and to bring interesting people into you so you can understand astrology. And my next guest is doing exactly the same thing, just using a different medium. Where I'm using my voice, he's using a different kind of voice. He is the editor of Hexagon Astrology magazine. It's a new magazine. It's about to launch. It's got a Kickstarter going, and they're coming down to the deadline. And if you love astrology and listen to the show as much as I love astrology, I encourage you to get in there and start looking at this, because it's going to be a fascinating a whole new approach to astrology. Not new with regard to the tools that we use and how we read the planets and stuff like that, but new topics, new conversations, things that are a little more hip, a little more trendy. What are the GMOs up to? What's the NSA up to? What's going on with the elections? Things that are, more current. What's the latest dance track? What's the Aries latest dance track? Stuff like that. Really cool, hip, cutting edge kind of stuff. A new take on astrology, and I think it's really fascinating. It's exciting for people like me who get all jazzed up about astrology anyway. So my guest today is Matt Savinar. He is the editor and the guy who's pulling his hair out right now, trying to get money for this Kickstarter to going, and Hexagon magazine. So Matt, welcome to Turning of the Wheel.
Hey, Chris, you know what I'm gonna do when you post this? I'm gonna take what you just said and put it at the top of the Kickstarter, because you worded it better than I could word it. So.
Well, very good. Well, that's great. So listen, tell me, this is a great magazine. I love anything about astrology. Really gets me excited. This is a great idea. You're ready to launch. You're going to be about once a quarter, you think, magazine?
Yeah, to start once a quarter.
Okay, cool.
Ideally, it will be bi-monthly, every 2 months.
Yeah.
But I want to do once a quarter, like this one. The first one will be out in August, and then the second one we have scheduled for December, because this is the first magazine I've written for magazines before. I've made my living as in throughout most of my adult life as a writer, but I've never published a magazine before.
Right.
So I do have people I'm working with who have worked in the magazine industry for their entire lives. People to consult with, but it's still a learn as you go. So
it's a real learn as you go. I've been a freelance writer for almost the majority of my life as well, so I know that end of the story as well. But I don't know the nuts and bolts of getting a magazine out there and distributed and all the postage and all that stuff. So it's a massive undertaking. But my hat is off to you.
I do once a quarter while while we go through the learning curve.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know what else?
And then
part of it is that we have to have enough time. Enough time has to pass in order for us to see what is going on with astrology. That's why I don't ever look at astrology on a daily basis, because it's too vague. I look at my own charts, obviously, but I think we need a little more time in between. That's why I publish my newsletter every week, because there's enough time for the things to move in that time. You have to have enough action.
Yeah, totally.
So it's really good to do it that way. I think that time is a good time frame. So let me tell you, what does the hexagon stand for? Just out of curiosity.
Okay, so a couple different things. Okay, so one of the ways I taught myself astrology, there was a bunch of them. One of them was through looking at the charts of spy satellites.
Mm-hmm.
So spy satellites have charts just like people. Your listeners probably know this, but the general public. So you just look at the chart when they launched it, and then usually enough information has trickled out that, what's funny is I'm talking about spy satellites, and now everything's reverberating.
Right.
But anyway, so I one of the first big spy satellite programs the first big one was called Corona.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, maybe I could call my magazine Corona, because they got, hundreds of these looking down at us, and you can use astrology to look back at them, not just at satellites, at the government, at corporations, at, people in power. And so I thought, I'll call it Corona, like the corona of the star. But I ran that name by a few friends, and they automatically thought, it's like a beer magazine or something, like Corona beer. So
right.
I was like, that could just be who my friends are, that they would automatically assume Corona means Corona beer. But I was like, okay, then Equinox, but there's already an Equinox astrology out there. And then I thought, well, the second big spy program, the spy satellite program, was called Hexagon, and that had just been declassified a couple years ago, actually. And so I thought, oh, that sounds cool. Then I looked, I said, okay, well, what's the occult meaning of a hexagon? Because, I'm not an expert on sacred geometry or anything like that, but I'm aware of the field. And I thought, well, a hexagon probably stands for something. So I looked it up, and it stands for, like, balance between light and dark, male, female, all that type of stuff.
Right.
So, okay, that sounds good. And then, like in nature, you see hexagons a lot wherever there's like like in honeybee combs.
Right. Yeah.
That you see in nature, and then also if you pronounce it out, it's like hex be gone. So like the hex of disinformation be gone.
Okay. Yeah.
And then finally, it just kind of sounds cool. So.
Yeah, that's all that really matters. Well, also the hexagon is a Buddhist symbol as well, symbolizing the Eightfold Path. So that's very cool as well, because the Buddhists also believe in astrology, and they practice it, and they see the value of it. So it's a very good idea. And I think that I think astrology, I have to say this, I think astrology is a very much of a Uranian study, and we've got Uranus in Aries right now, and the time seems right to sort of kick it up a notch, because it's all about, Aries is all about blazing new paths and doing something different and new, and Uranus is a perfect combination for, being in Aries at this time. It's very innovative. So your angle and your take on astrology is kind of cool, because you're going to be doing things that are a little bit more contemporary, right?
Yeah, totally. What you said, there's been articles, there's what you said at the beginning, where it's like, it's not, on the one hand, it's not like there's that much that's truly new in astrology.
Right.
Like anything I'm doing, there's probably somebody who's done something at least somewhat similar at some point in the last 100 years,
Right.
But what we've done is we've taken it, and it looks like people who are listening may not be able to see it, but if you look at the samples of it posted, anybody who sees the physical product, it doesn't look or feel or vibe like the typical kind of like New Age astrology magazine or New Age anything. Astrology gets bunched up with New Age stuff, even though it's actually not New Age. It's been around for 5,000 years. But it looks different. It vibes different. It has a different voice. Most of the people who are writing, not everybody, but most of the people who are writing, certainly for the first and second issues, they're not the big names. Now, there are, like, Mike Luton's got an article, and he's a big name, but it's a lot of more people who are not, the super well-known on the astrology circuit.
Right.
Although I'm open to contributions from people who are super well-known, it's just difficult to get those contributions when you're totally brand new, because they don't know who you are. So.
Exactly, and they don't want to take a chance. So it's a gamble on that part. But astrology, it has a real certain appeal, I think, to a generation that is now evolving, simply because they are not at all turned on to the whole religion thing. They understand spirituality. They are looking for something that has a little more depth to it, and astrology has a lot of appeal on a mass level because of the simple fact that everybody's got a birthday, number one, and it is so damn accurate. When you start to look at it and the way it starts to unfold and the way you get to interpret it, I think that it's a great area to launch into. I think the younger generation, like I have a son, for example, who's 23 years old, and he is totally into astrology. He's always picking my brain to what's going on with this, what's going on. He actually understands it really, really well. So that's sort of an indicator of a generation that's coming along through here that is beginning to reach out and find these things to be valid. And the biggest caution I say to all of these people who I talk to who are coming into it, I said, don't expect to be told, go to the supermarket on Tuesday and buy a lottery ticket, or watch out when you're walking to your car this morning. I would never say stuff like that, but I would say to them, hey, the theme is here in this week for you perhaps to get some money. Maybe you got a bill that's late and hasn't been paid yet, or you're going to get a check in the mail. They both deal with money. But as long as you're apprised of the theme, you still have a lot of knowledge to go in. And I think that when it gets to be too precise, people expect too much of astrology in some regard. And I think it's just the way it's positioned that really makes a big difference with them.
Yeah, what you said about your son and people in that age group, I've noticed that age group that has a higher interest in astrology, I'm 36, they seem to have more interest in it than my age group did when we were in our early 20s. The difference is, so there's more interest. The only one challenge is economic. It's a really tough economy for people in that age group. So I think there's more interest whether they're getting consultations and stuff like that is a different story because of the issue around income. But that's a whole nother, that's a whole
Well,
nother discussion.
that's always the trouble with astrology. People feel as if they can get enough on their own, which they really can't. I've been doing astrology for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, and I've found that I always approach it like this. I say astrology is an art and it's a science. You can go to any computer program and get cookbook stuff out of a computer that is fairly germane to you and very broad and very generalized information, but you're not going to get the specificity or the synthesis of information that you can get from a human being who really understands the science and the art of astrology. Because really what it is taking the science and turning it into an art, which is the art of interpretation, which can be incredibly complicated, but it is a live, in-the-moment kind of process that is incredibly accurate when you have it and it hits right, as you well know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be an interesting experiment. I think it's great to do this. I encourage people to get out there. It's hexagonastrology.com, and I encourage you to get out there and help this Kickstarter. It's a great idea, and especially people who have an interest in astrology. Astrology, I think eventually, part of the reason it suffered for so long is, in some ways, is because people always associated it with a satanic tool or the occult or whatever, and it really is nothing like that. It's just a simple, well, it's not simple by any stretch, but it's a very useful, constructive, early form of psychology that is incredibly accurate. I was had this conversation with Jeff Jower about back in December. He was one of the great astrologers who was out there in the main scene, and he recently passed away, unfortunately. But I had a chance to talk with him, and he was actually a psychology major before he started studying astrology, and that's where he thinks it all comes from. He says it really is the earliest form of psychology. So, for high school students or seniors who are graduating, who are unclear where they need to go, astrology can really help them in that regard.
Yeah, when I talk to folks who are a little more skeptical about it, I say, hey, you don't need to believe in it or anything like that. Just look at it as an ancient form of psychology,
right?
As something like a form of the Myers-Briggs that was around 2 or 3 or 4,000 years before Myers-Briggs. Right. People seem to be okay with the Myers-Briggs. That somehow, because corporations use that. They even use it in law school. When I was in law school, we all took the Myers-Briggs test, and so. You have law schools, you have business schools, you have giant corporations that will use astrology publicly, like they're not hiding, use the Myers-Briggs, which is something that was just invented in the 50s, I think.
Well, it's from Carl Jung. Carl Jung was the guy. I mean, basically what they did was they took Carl Jung's layout of the emotions and classified them with names and numbers and came up with a formula.
Yeah. But I just tell people it's basically an ancient form of that, because people tend to be comfortable with Myers-Briggs, even if they're not comfortable with astrology.
I know.
The packaging, Myers-Briggs is packaged as something that big, respectable corporations use, whereas astrology is often seen. It's really just an image problem. It's not that it's not as effective as Myers-Briggs. Obviously, I'm biased. I think astrology is better than Myers-Briggs, but these people who are comfortable with Myers-Briggs, but they're not comfortable with astrology, and that's only because of the packaging and the image problem.
It is a real image problem, and I think where that happened was when they first started doing the daily astrology in the newspapers, back in the 1920s or whenever they started publishing them. That's when things really went awry because they started making broad generalizations about people. So how I address that conversation with people, I say, any sort of predictive astrology, whether it's in a magazine or like myself, I do a weekly newsletter. I always tell them to read what it says for the sun sign and read what it says for the rising sign or the moon. And when you combine those together in a passage and combine those paragraphs or that sentences together, you'll be much closer to where you need to be with regard to the accuracy. But don't look for that sort of, golden, parachute coming out of the sky dropping you, a bundle of money on your front deck or whatever. Don't expect the sky to fall, I guess is what I would say. And in that regard, it's got a certain kind of, it can be incredibly valuable for making decisions about major career decisions, especially when we've seen everybody who's gone through their Saturn return, and I'm going through my second Saturn return, so I know what to expect. And I think the longer time marches on, and the more empirical data we have, obviously the more accurate it's going to become.
Yeah, I use all that stuff even with things like the Kickstarter. I'm like, well, what's the ultimate north node of the Kickstarter Libra 10th house. What's the north node of the magazine? Libra 11th house. What's my north node? Libra 3rd house. And then I try to figure out, like, okay, what's the ultimate intent of this entity, whether it's a magazine or a Kickstarter or whatever, and what can I do to kind of facilitate that?
Yeah, I noticed that
So, and then,
you picked the date to launch the magazine as 8/19/2015, 11:59 a.m.
correct.
Yeah, and so to let everybody know why you chose that date and time.
Well, a couple things. I felt this was definitely going to be a Saturn and Scorpio publication, given the nature of what I write about and the nature of what some of the other primary writers write about. B, I wanted it to launch sometime during my North Node return, since I'm the editor, the primary person in charge.
Yep.
My North Node's in Libra. And that was the best time in between, like, January of 2015 and the end of this year.
Huh. Interesting.
Now, some people will say, oh, but it's good with Venus retrograde. And I'm like, well, yeah, Venus retrograde is great for renegade forms of art.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the content of this magazine, if you look at the movies that are coming out the same week, these are some movies that are going to be some big blockbuster movies, but all of them involve something seriously renegade. So the main topics in our first issue are hip-hop and police brutality, government conspiracies. They're like actual conspiracies, not like theories, but actual stuff like what the NSA is doing. And then corporate criminality. And if you look at the movies coming out that same week, you got the NWA movie coming out, Straight Outta Compton, which is all about hip-hop and police brutality. Then you got another movie coming out called American Ultra, which is about, conspiracy. It's kind of enemy of the state meets Cheech and Chong. But it's basically about, it's with the guy who played Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, but he played like a stoner who ends up having to take on the CIA. Him and his stoner girlfriend had to take on the powers that be. The point is the Venus retrograde is good if what you're doing is has a renegade element to it.
Yeah.
If we're doing just like a traditional type astrology magazine, then maybe that would not work.
Well, I have different views about the retrogrades in general. I don't think that they're bad at all. I was born under a Mercury retrograde and Saturn retrograde and Mars retrograde for that matter. I don't have a problem with them at all. As a matter of fact, I think they're real motivators for. I always say just apply the prefix RE to whatever you're doing, whether you're reconsidering, refinancing, reevaluating, whatever. I think it's an excellent time to take stock and do things and launch. Don't let that stuff bother me at all. I would never let that bother me.
Yeah, no, it seems from what I from looking over your site, you question the mainstream. It doesn't seem like you're somebody who goes along with the mainstream. So if you've got 3 planets that are retrograde, that's kind of like what I'm kind of getting at. It's like if you have retrograde stuff, that just means you're not going to be going along with the traditional path.
Which is exactly where the real good stuff happens. It's everybody who's been a renegade, everybody who's been an outlaw, everybody who's been off the fringe, hasn't followed the rules. That's where the real progress comes from, and that's a very Uranus and Aries kind of theme. And so, it's the right time. I think Uranus and Aries is the main driver. Uranus, in my mind, is a higher octave of Mercury. Mercury is the planet that rules communication. So Uranus is sort of kicking things up a notch and bringing it to a higher level where it has a much broader appeal, impact, and it's going to be a very innovative, cool thing to have and to understand. So I think the timing's right. I really do. I think it's really good timing.
I sure hope so. There's a lot of people say, "Man, this looks amazing. It's going to be awesome." And I'm sitting here, when you're the person in charge, you have to do all the wording. And so I'm like, "Well, I think you're right, but I really hope so."
Well, nothing happens without a chance. I mean, nothing happens easily either, without something happening easily. So there's some parts of it that are definitely going to be more. But I do think that your general audience, the state of the world, let's put this in a much bigger context. I think the state of the world is ready for this kind of a magazine, largely because of the simple fact that, we are all in search of something. This is a very much of a sort of a Neptune and Pisces kind of flavor to it because we're sort of searching for an answer somewhere. We can't really quite find it. And astrology does require a lot of head space to figure it out, and it's very complex, and you have to have the right person translate it for you. But it does have a certain appeal to this whole generation that's born under these signs, as well as older people such as myself who have subscribed to it since I first heard it. I mean, I had my first chart done when I was 18 years old, and I've never been the same since. I mean, I just totally got into it ever since. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's a real game changer, especially when it comes to compatibility. My gosh, for anything else, for compatibility or stuff like that, it's just incredibly accurate. The people that you meet, the friends that you meet. Whenever I teach a class on astrology, I always ask the people in the class about the significant others, and their eyes light up when I start describing them. I mean, it's just. And one of the best things I've ever found is that when I used to do a lot of live readings on the air, people would call up from I don't know where, all over the place, and I didn't know them from a hole in the wall. And all they would do is give me their birth date, place, and time, and I'd start talking to them. I even had a few occasions where I'd start talking to them and I'd get it wrong, and I'd say, well, what do you mean? How can this be wrong? And they'd say, it's not AM, it's PM. And I'd say, oh, well, no wonder. Major difference. So to me,
Yeah.
even though it was a mistake at the time, I thought that was beautiful because it was perfect validation. Then when I reread the chart with the corrected time, everything clicked into place.
Yeah, it's always, anybody's done astrology for a while, you've had that experience. I just had one this morning. I was on another show, and one of the hosts there was one person who's an astrologer, one person who's not. I said, oh, well, what's your sun moon? And his that's in Scorpio moon. I said, oh, so you've gone on a lot of high-risk overseas missions. And he's like, oh, my God, you're totally right.
Yeah, see, that's it. And that's the stories that you can't quit. So tell us about some of the stories in the premier topic, premier issue, rather.
Okay, so we have three features. First is on the National Security Agency. Now, that is my article. Most of it, about 70%, is a reprint from the article I did for the Mountain Astrologer about a year and a half ago. Interesting differences. I've revised it, updated it. There's information that we didn't have or wasn't able to make it into that article. We also have a lot of imagery that was not available back then. And that is actually, when I first sent that to TMA about 2 years ago, it turned out the day I sent it to them, that was the same day Ed Snowden contacted Glenn Greenwald of the UK Guardian. We found out later.
That's cool.
And so, yeah, so then that all went public right around the time that they were checking the article, going over the article for review. Now, what that is originally I planned that as the first part of the three-part series. So, on the surveillance state, with the first part being on the National Security Agency, second part being on the National Reconnaissance Office. They run on the spy satellites, and they have these very, very interesting mission patches that are filled with occult and astrological imagery. Huh. And so that's going to be in the second. And these patches have been out in the public ether for a while, but nobody in the astrology world has seen them. But you feel really, really weird, strange stuff.
So they use these. They use the glyphs and the symbols as ways of communicating.
Well, it's they're basically morale patches, but they're very occult.
Okay.
So they had like a satellite that had a scorpion on it, and it was a Scorpius satellite.
I see.
And they have owls and just all sorts of strange stuff. I'll send you a link to some articles I've done.
Yes, it's interesting because it's sort of like astrology really is the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, but they all believe. This is what I've discovered.
Well, I don't think they believe it. I think they're just using these images because I think it's mostly guys probably in their 20s who just think it looks kind of cool. But there are people in the government and in high up in the corporations who do use astrology. But anyway, so that's the second part. And then the third part of that three-part series, which will be out in our third issue, is on the Central Intelligence Agency. Why is that particularly relevant now? Well, as probably most people have heard at this point, the CIA has a big role to play in the narcotics trade. Here we are. Baltimore is filled with riots. Baltimore is the most heroin-addicted city in America. Where's all the heroin coming from? All the heroin, 90% of the world's heroin is produced in Afghanistan. Much of it in areas that are under control of the U.S. or U.S. proxies. So you've got the agency that historically has managed the drug trade. All the heroin's coming from the same place where that agency is set up. And then you've got the city that's the most heroin-addicted city, going up in flames. So there is, it's particularly relevant given the times that we're in. But that's not something you're going to see in most New Age type magazines.
No, that's
then
real.
we've got, Oh, go on.
That's real investigative reporting. That's really uncovering stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it I would call it, it's for more like forensic research, because this is all stuff I've picked up from reading books and doing watching documentaries, articles, all that type of stuff. I would say investigative reporting. You actually have to, like Michael Hastings was an investigative reporter. He would actually go to Iraq. I'm at home on a computer or maybe at a library, so I would say it's more like forensic research.
Right.
But it vibes that way when people read that type of article. It has that type of feel. So I know what you're getting at. But anyway, so that's my contribution. Then we have one on the feminine asteroids called Ladies of the Zodiac at Showtime.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know, but most of your listeners almost certainly know about this, but in case just like for the general public, you've got your Sun, Moon, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus. Most of these are kind of considered masculine they're like considered more masculine, except for Venus and Moon. Mercury's kind of considered neutral. But there's also feminine asteroids that are obviously more feminine in scope, and so we have an article on that. Those don't get as much play as the planets, and so that's our second feature. We have a third feature on called Zodiac Mixtapes, which basically is by Jason Fleming of goes by Sagittarian Mind. And songs for your sign. Now, it's a sun sign article, but it's a sun sign article with a different twist, which is the hip hop component to it. What else? We have a profile of Jesselyn Raddick, who's Ed Snowden's attorney.
Oh, wow.
And that's one I have not been able to show online because the photos we licensed for that. We got some really nice photos of her, but we can't use those in a promotion. So I don't think I can post them on the Kickstarter page, but it looks great. Like her article, she's a serious person. The topic is serious, but the article's a little lighter. We wanted to do like a profile, almost like a Vanity Fair or Vogue type thing.
Yeah.
But about like somebody who's a little bit of a renegade. So some of the topic, the people she works with and people she assists are involved in very serious matters. But that article is a little bit of a lighter article.
Wow.
And then let's see what I know. We have Confessions of a Virgo Pilates Instructor, which is again a lighter article. About from a woman who is a Pilates instructor, and she's a Virgo, and these are her confessions. We have a forecast section. Now, what we're doing with the forecast, a lot of people might wonder, why are you doing sun sign forecasts? Because as professional astrologers, sun sign forecasts are the bane of our existence. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but at the same time, if they're done right, what happens is that I can send a copy of that magazine to any yoga studio, any Pilates studio, any acupuncture studio, anything involved in like alternative health. And what happens at those places, they have a high rate of people who are into astrology. So if we have sun sign forecasts in there, at the very least, they will pick up the magazine and flip through it.
Right, and if they're well versed in their own sign, they may they'll know enough to read the ascendant as well, their ascendant as well.
Yeah, and we'll have a disclaimer in there to look at it for their ascendant. But my point with that is it gets people into the magazine, and if they're flipping through it, we've made it look so beautiful that hopefully they'll want to read some of the other articles too.
Yeah,
now, there's probably something I'm forgetting. Michael Luton has an article called The Capricorn Conspiracy. We have one, Saturn in Scorpio and Beauty at Any Age by Willow of Willow's Web. And what we're doing, I got to add some pages for Mike Luton's article. So with magazine publishing, you got to add 8 pages to add 80 pages. So we're going to have some additional contributions too that I'm still working on.
Oh, that's great. Sounds really cool. I mean, I think I can't wait to get. I'm going to sign up, folks. Those of you who are listening, I'm going to sign up for the Kickstarter and help these guys get off the ground, because it's really valuable to do that. I mean, this is a really important area of the world. We're talking today with Matt Savinar. He's the editor and publisher of Hexagon Astrology. It's a brand new magazine. HexagonAstrology.com is the website, and you go on there. Is that right?
Yeah, if they can just go to Kickstarter and plug in Hexagon Astrology. That's probably where most of it.
All right, the best thing to do is
most of the information.
Yeah, go to Kickstarter and click on the button that says Hexagon Astrology. You'll get to the page, and then what do people get when they do the Kickstarter thing?
Well, we got 6 or 7 different levels. There's like $10, you get the magazine. At I think 25, you get the magazine, the first copy, or one of the first, get a copy of the first issue, plus a thank you letter on official letterhead signed by me, and then acknowledgement in the acknowledgement section. I think everything above 25 gets acknowledgement in the acknowledgement section.
Oh, that's great. That's good. So it's worth your while. It's worth people's while to do that.
Oh yeah, and then starting at 50, you get all that. Plus, you get these cool. I came up with these really cool metal cards. Yeah. And I don't know if the photos that we have on the site do them justice, but like I showed some to some people locally, and like one friend of mine was like, "Oh my God, that looks like it gets you into Area 51 or something." Like they just look really cool. And they're each individually numbered. So like if you pledged, I think at 100, you're a founding financier. So you get a card, you get one of the metal cards with our logo on it, it's Hexagon Astrology, founding financier number 25 or whatever number.
Wow, that's great. Awesome.
And then you can get ads also. I think the ads start at 150 for a quarter page ad. And the other thing, I should probably add this to the page. If somebody wants to pledge like 150, even if they don't have a astrology practice or a business that they want to put in there, they can donate that ad to a friend or to a nonprofit or whatever. Or they can use it at some point in the future, like they're just starting out, their ad's not ready or whatnot. So, actually, there's a couple of people who've made pretty big pledges, and they're just donating their ad to local business.
Good. Well, that's great. Awesome. So you're open to, as far as advertising goes, you're looking at any kind of field. But most people who will be advertising will be who are comfortable in that realm anyway. That makes most sense. Like I would advertise in there, for example, for my practice and to promote my show and stuff like that. That's certainly
there's what I'm trying to get is also people in like alternative health, like anything Pilates, acupuncture, because my thinking is if we have 10 to 15% of each issue is about one of those things, because so many people in those fields are into astrology, that gives me a way to put the magazine to distribute it to folks in those industries, and then maybe you get people who are into astrology who tend to be open to things like herbal remedies.
Yes.
So then maybe we could have advertisers from herbal companies or herbalists or naturopaths or whatever, and it seems like there'd be a certain synergy there. So there's a lot of synergy there. Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of synergy there with all of those areas. People tend to be in all those same circles, all gravitate to the same information.
Yeah, exactly.
So it does work. It works out really well. And so I know we're running out of time here, so I know you got to run. But I just wanted to touch base with you real quickly and try to get something up and hopefully get to promote the magazine and stuff like that. So I think it'll be a really interesting thing to do. I'm certainly going to chip in, guys out there who are listening. So bear that in mind and support this new initiative. It's a very Uranian kind of thing to do, innovative, cutting edge, out there. New, interesting, cool ideas. So I definitely encourage you to get out there and do that. Is there anything else you want to add, Matt?
Well, let me ask you, Chris. Hey, can you guess what the ascendant is of the magazine?
I don't know what the ascendant of the magazine is, but I would suggest, I would think it'd be Gemini.
No, Scorpio.
Oh, Scorpio. Wow, interesting. Just because of the hexagon, yeah. Well,
but Pluto, the ruler then is going to be Pluto in the third. So you're kind of getting at a So there's a mercurial, planets in a house that's associated with mercurial pursuits.
Okay, yeah, well, that's good. I like that. I think that's got a lot of sense too. I mean, the Scorpio piece is good because Scorpio is about intense depth and getting beneath the covers, which is what you're doing when you're doing things like the NSA and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of that's what led me down the road of investigation. You're sort of digging beneath things and seeing what's going on behind the scenes. So that's a good thing. So very good. All right. Well, listen, it's been great talking to you today. I know you got to run, so I just want to touch base with you real quickly and
thank you for having me on. I really do.
Yeah, sure. It. And I'll continue to talk a little bit after this about the magazine after you're off, and we'll touch base, and I'll be on your Kickstarter.
Okay, great. I told all the pledges help, all the shares and the social media stuff really helps too. That's like the one thing we need the most help.
That's a whole new ball of wax right there. That's a really that's something that should be looked into. That'd be a great article. It'd be the astrology of social media, because it is an odd one. It's got to be it's got to be all Neptunian as far as I'm concerned, because it's
Facebook has got a Sun Neptune conjunction almost precise in Aquarian.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because I mean it's such an odd area. I mean this is just my personal opinion. The whole idea of social media is such an odd phenomenon in itself. I mean, it's
If
good.
you tried to explain it to me 20 years ago, I would have been like, I would have been able to understand the internet. I'm like, okay, so everybody gets to have like their own TV show or something, but on this computer network, okay, I kind of get it. But the social media would have made no sense to me. I would never have believed I would ever be using it if you told me like when I was a teenager.
And now you almost have to use it in some ways, whether you like it or
Yeah.
not. And I'm not really that fond of it because I just think it's kind of an odd thing. It's such a time drain, first of all, and I'm not reading a lot of good content. I don't know if the content's valid or real or anything. I don't.
Yeah,
There's no way of.
that's actually one of the reasons I think a print magazine is necessary because the internet is kind of gotten destroyed by social media.
It
Like
has.
the legitimate parts of the internet where you would go to get really, nourishing information. Now, social media is almost like just kind of like taking over everything, and it's almost like strangling out the bad is like pushing out the good. But
It's pervasive as well. That's the problem. Is that it's not just it's something you go check on when you're watching dinner. People are on it all day long, and there's this stream
yeah,
of constant stuff coming through. We have no idea whether it's right or wrong, left or right, up or down. We have no clue about any of it. Some of it's good. I have to say, sometimes I come across something that's useful, funny, or whatever, entertaining. But overall, it's certainly not a source of news by any stretch of the imagination, and it's kind of scary. It
yeah.
really it's an unusual
Okay.
beast. But I know you got to go. Thanks so much, Matt, for
Okay.
coming.